It's funny how the smallest moments can shatter years of devotion. For me, it wasn't the countless late nights, the missed family dinners, or even the constant schedule changes. It was a simple pot of homemade chili that finally broke everything we'd built. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming, but love has a way of blinding us to the obvious. The sizzle of ground beef and onions filled my kitchen as I watched Madison struggle with her math homework at the counter. My granddaughter's forehead creased in concentration, reminding me so much of her mother at that age. "Grandpa Jack," she said, looking up at me with those earnest brown eyes, "can you help me with these fractions?" I wiped my hands on my worn denim apron and moved closer, the familiar aroma of my signature chili bringing back countless memories of similar evenings. Tyler, my 7-year-old grandson, sat quietly in the corner of the kitchen, his legs swinging as he colored. He had always been the more sensitive one, prone to anxiety when routines changed. That's why I made sure to keep his favorite Spider-Man cup filled with apple juice, just the way he liked it. 6 years of watching these children 4 days a week had taught me all their little quirks and preferences. I remembered the day Amanda first asked me to help with childcare. My daughter's eyes had been red from crying, the weight of her new promotion at the law firm and David's startup struggles crushing her spirits. "Dad, I don't know what to do," she had sobbed. "The nanny quit, and I can't miss these crucial cases." Without hesitation, I had offered to watch the kids. After 30 years as a high school coach and math teacher, what better way to spend my retirement than helping my only daughter achieve her dreams? The chili was just about ready when I heard the familiar sound of Amanda's Tesla pulling into the driveway. I glanced at the clock, 7:45 p.m., almost 2 hours later than she had promised. Madison's shoulders tensed slightly. She had become attuned to her mother's moods after late workdays. The kitchen door swung open, bringing with it a gust of cool air and Amanda's harried presence. Her designer suit was slightly wrinkled, her usually perfectly styled hair showing signs of a stressful day. "The kids haven't had dinner yet?" Amanda's sharp tone cut through the peaceful atmosphere we'd maintained all afternoon. "Dad, it's almost 8 o'clock. "We were waiting for you," I replied calmly, stirring the chili. "You said you'd be home by 6 to have family dinner." I kept my voice steady, though my hands shook slightly. "Madison wanted to show you her improved math grades." "I can't believe this," Amanda muttered, dropping her briefcase on the counter with a loud thud that made Tyler flinch. "Dad, they need routine. They can't be waiting around for me every night. I've told you this before. Feed them at 6, homework done by 7. Why is this so hard to understand?" The wooden spoon in my hand stilled. "Amanda, sweetheart, they're children, not a case schedule. Madison wanted—" "That's exactly the problem." Amanda's voice rose, her professional composure cracking. "You're undermining every parenting decision I make. The kids need structure, not your constant indulgence. God, Dad, you're becoming more of a burden than a help." The kitchen fell silent. Madison's pencil stopped moving, and Tyler's crayon snapped in his tight grip. The chili continued to simmer, its homey aroma now feeling suffocating. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and for a moment, I saw not the accomplished lawyer, but the little girl who once cried when I was 5 minutes late picking her up from school. The little girl I had raised alone after her mother's death, the one I had worked extra coaching jobs to put through law school. Without a word, I untied my apron and folded it neatly on the counter. My movements were deliberate as I gathered my keys and wallet. Madison started to say something, but Amanda's sharp look silenced her. As I walked to the door, Tyler's quiet sniffle nearly broke my resolve. But I kept moving. 30 years of teaching had taught me that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from silence. "Dad," Amanda called out, her voice holding a note of uncertainty. But I had already stepped outside, closing the door softly behind me. The evening air felt cool against my weathered face as I walked to my truck, leaving behind the home where I had spent countless hours creating memories with my grandchildren. It wasn't until I was safely in my driveway, 3 blocks away, that I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my daughter's words. My house felt emptier than usual that night. I sat in my old leather recliner, the one Sarah, my late wife, had always threatened to throw out, and stared at the wall of family photos in front of me. 23 years. That's how long it had been since I lost her to cancer, leaving me to raise our 12-year-old daughter alone. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same determination I'd instilled in Amanda to help her survive that loss was now the very thing driving us apart. The largest frame held a photo from Amanda's law school graduation. There she stood, radiant in her cap and gown, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck. I remembered how my back had ached that day, not from her embrace, but from the long hours I'd spent painting houses over the weekend. Another side job to help cover her textbook costs. "You're my hero, Dad," she'd whispered then. Now I was apparently just a burden. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Mike. "Missed you at poker night, old man." I hadn't told him about what happened yet. Mike had warned me 3 years ago when I sold my beloved fishing boat to help with Madison's private school tuition. "You're enabling her, Jack," he'd said. "Amanda needs to figure out her own path." Maybe he'd been right. The memories came flooding back as I sat there in the darkness. Amanda's first steps across our tiny apartment living room, teaching her to ride a bike in the park where I used to coach Little League. The night she got her first big case and called me at midnight, her voice trembling with excitement. I'd always been her safe harbor, the one constant in a life marked by early loss. My hand reached for my phone again, thumbing through recent photos of the grandkids. There was Tyler at his last t-ball game, wearing my old coaching cap that was still too big for him. Madison showing off her science fair project, the one we'd stayed up late working on because Amanda had been stuck in court. The children's laughter had filled the void left by Sarah's death, given me purpose beyond my retirement. Now what? The clock struck midnight and my phone lit up with a notification. Amanda had posted on Facebook a picture of the kids eating takeout pizza, captioned, "Quick dinner solution for busy moms." Working mom life. No guilt. My throat tightened. 6 years of home-cooked meals, of teaching Tyler to eat his vegetables, of making sure Madison's allergies were carefully monitored, reduced to a convenient problem solved. I opened my text messages, seeing Amanda's message from earlier. "The kids are fine, we've got this handled." Below it was an unopened text from Madison sent through Amanda's phone. "Grandpa, Tyler won't stop crying. When are you coming back?" I closed the messages without responding. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. The next morning I woke early out of habit, my hands automatically reaching for the pancake mix before I remembered. No grandkids to feed today, no spelling words to review, no tiny voices arguing over who got the blue plate. Instead, I found myself driving to Sarah's grave for the first time in months. The morning dew still clung to her headstone as I sat on the damp grass beside it. "You'd know what to do, wouldn't you, honey?" I whispered, tracing her name with my finger. "You always knew how to reach Amanda when she built her walls too high." A young couple walked past, pushing a stroller, and my heart clenched. Sarah had been exactly my age when I lost her. She never got to see Amanda graduate, never got to hold her grandchildren, never had to navigate the complex dance of letting go while holding on. Back home, I found myself in the spare room that had become the grandkids' space. Tyler's dinosaur drawings covered one wall. Madison's books neatly lined the shelf I'd built her last Christmas. A half-finished puzzle lay on the small table, the corner piece missing, just like our family now felt incomplete. My fingers brushed against the morning schedules I'd carefully printed and posted. Breakfast at 7, homework review, afternoon snacks, reading time. Structure, Amanda had said, as if I hadn't spent decades teaching teenagers the value of routine. The sound of my neighbor's grandchildren playing outside drifted through the window. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a different life, one where I wasn't constantly arranging my days around someone else's schedule, the garden I'd always wanted to plant, the woodworking projects gathering dust in my garage, the fishing trips with Mike I'd been declining for years. Maybe it was time to remember who Jack Peterson was beyond being everyone else's safety net. 3 months passed like molasses in winter. I'd always heard that time heals all wounds, but whoever said that never had to drive past their grandchildren's house every day on the way to the grocery store. I started taking the long route, adding 10 minutes to my journey just to avoid seeing Amanda's Tesla in the driveway, or catching a glimpse of Tyler's bike thrown carelessly on the front lawn, something that never would have happened on my watch. My brother Mike's suggestion to join the local community center turned out to be a lifeline I didn't know I needed. "You can't mope around that empty house forever," he'd insisted, practically dragging me to my first woodworking class. Now, 3 months later, my garage had transformed into a workshop, the scent of cedar and pine replacing the lingering aroma of children's snacks and art supplies. Every stroke of sandpaper felt like therapy, each completed project a small victory in reclaiming my identity. But life has a way of keeping you tethered to the past, no matter how hard you try to move forward. I was finishing up a birdhouse. Tyler had always loved watching the cardinals in my backyard, when my phone lit up with Mike's name. "You're not going to believe who I just ran into at Pete's Hardware," he said, his voice carrying that careful tone people use when delivering complicated news. Amanda was there, looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. She was buying one of those child-proof lock sets in Jack. She couldn't figure out which screwdriver she needed. "Remember how you used to joke that she couldn't tell a Phillips from a flathead?" My throat tightened, but I forced a chuckle. She never did take to home maintenance. "The new nanny quit," Mike continued. "Third one in 3 months. Heard it from Linda at the grocery store. You know how she keeps tabs on everyone. Apparently Tyler's been having those anxiety attacks again." The sandpaper crumpled in my grip. Tyler's attacks had started after Sarah's death, though he'd never known his grandmother. It was like that grief had seeped into our family's DNA, manifesting in his tiny body through gasping breaths and trembling hands. I'd spent countless nights teaching him breathing exercises, holding him close until the panic subsided. But it wasn't just Tyler. Madison's teacher had emailed me directly, a breach of protocol that spoke volumes about her concern. "Mr. Peterson, I know you're not officially on Madison's contact list anymore, but her grades have dropped significantly. She's withdrawn in class, and yesterday I found her crying in the library during lunch." The email sat in my inbox, unanswered, a digital reminder of the promises I'd made and the boundaries I now needed to keep. The community grapevine, which I'd always dismissed as small-town gossip, now became my window into their lives. David, Amanda's husband, was spending more time at his startup's office, often sleeping on the break room couch. Amanda had been seen arguing with her law partner in the courthouse parking lot, her usual composed facade cracking under the strain. The children were showing up to school with mismatched socks and uncombed hair, small details that spoke volumes to anyone who knew how meticulous their mother had always been. My days developed a new rhythm: mornings in the workshop, afternoons volunteering at the high school's woodshop class, teaching teenagers the patience and precision I wished I could still instill in my own grandchildren. I joined Mike's poker nights, planted that garden I'd always dreamed about, even adopted an old golden retriever from the shelter who reminded me of the dog we'd had when Amanda was young. But every Wednesday at 3:15 p.m., I found myself parked across from Madison's school, hidden behind tinted windows and 3 months of stubborn pride. I watched as she emerged, her shoulders slightly hunched, backpack dragging on the ground, a far cry from the confident girl who used to race to my truck, eager to tell me about her day. Different nannies picked her up each week, some looking frazzled before they'd even begun their shift. Then came the call that shattered my carefully constructed new normal. Madison had been using her friend's phone to dial my number, a fact I discovered only because Mrs. Rodriguez, her friend's mother, finally intervened. "Your granddaughter's been crying herself to sleep at our house during play dates," she told me, her voice gentle but firm. "She says she misses your stories, the way you do different voices for each character." Tyler, too. He had a meltdown at their last playdate when someone suggested making cookies. Said they wouldn't taste right because they weren't made in Grandpa's kitchen. That night, I sat in my workshop until dawn, staring at the half-finished dollhouse I'd been building in secret, a replica of the one Sarah and I had bought for Amanda's 10th birthday. the one that now sat in Madison's room, carefully preserved through 3 decades of family history. My hands traced the tiny shutters, the miniature window boxes waiting to be filled with even tinier flowers. Pride and love had always been my strengths as a father, but maybe they were also my weakness. The question was, which would break first, my resolve or my heart? The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my workshop putting the final touches on the dollhouse when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, another habit I'd developed in my new, carefully structured life. Something made me answer. "Mr. Peterson?" The voice was professionally calm, but with an undercurrent of urgency that made my heart skip. "This is Nurse Jenkins from Riverside Elementary. Tyler's had a severe asthma attack. We've been trying to reach his mother, but..." I was in my truck before she finished speaking, muscle memory taking over as I navigated the familiar route to the school. They'd moved Tyler to the hospital by the time I arrived, but the school secretary's face told me everything I needed to know. "He was asking for you," she said softly. "Before the ambulance came, he kept saying he wanted his grandpa." The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me as I followed the signs to pediatric emergency. My mind raced with memories of smaller crises, scraped knees, fever nights, thunder-sparked fears, all the moments when I'd been their anchor. Now, after 3 months of silence, what right did I have to walk back into their lives? The answer came in the form of Tyler's small voice, wheezing but clear. "Grandpa." His face lit up as I entered the room, despite the oxygen mask fogging with each labored breath. Amanda sat beside his bed, her professional armor cracked wide open. Her makeup was smeared, her suit wrinkled, and in that moment she looked exactly like the 12-year-old girl who'd crawled into my bed the night after we lost her mother. "Dad," she whispered, and the word hung between us like a bridge and a barrier all at once. "They can't reach David. He's in meetings and I was in court when the school called and I can't. Her voice broke, years of carefully maintained control shattering under the fluorescent lights. I did what fathers do. I stepped forward, one hand finding Tyler's small fingers, the other squeezing Amanda's shoulder. "Breathe, buddy," I told Tyler, falling into our old rhythm. "Remember our game? Count the superheroes on the ceiling with me." I'd taught him this trick years ago, focusing on counting to control his breathing during attacks. The nurses had stuck glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and together we turned them into a sky full of caped crusaders. As Tyler's breathing steadied, Amanda's began to unravel. "Everything's falling apart," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "David sleeps at the office more nights than not. Madison's teacher wants her to see the school counselor. The new nanny gave notice yesterday because Tyler had another anxiety attack and she wasn't equipped to handle it. My partner's threatening to sideline me from the Wilson case because I keep missing meetings and I can't do it all anymore." "When was the last time you slept?" I asked, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. "I don't remember," she laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "God, Dad, how did you do it all those years after Mom died, working multiple jobs, coaching, teaching, raising me? How did you make it look so easy?" "It wasn't easy," I said quietly, watching Tyler's eyelids grow heavy as the medication took effect. "But I had something you don't." "What's that?" "Help." The word hung between us, heavy with 3 months of silence and years of unspoken truths. I had neighbors who carpooled, other teachers who traded shifts, parents from the team who brought casseroles. I learned the hard way that being strong doesn't mean doing it alone. Amanda's hand found mine, gripped tight enough to hurt. I thought I could prove. She started, then stopped. "After what I said to you, I was horrible, Dad. Absolutely horrible. And then I was too proud, too stubborn to admit it. Just like..." She trailed off, but I knew what she wasn't saying. Just like her mother. Sarah had been the same way, fierce, independent, determined to carry the world on her shoulders until life forced her to learn the grace of accepting help. "I went to therapy," she blurted suddenly, the words tumbling out like a confession. Started 2 months ago. Dr. Harrison says I have unresolved issues about losing mom, about control, about fear of abandonment. Says I push away the people I need most because I'm terrified of losing them anyway. Tyler stirred in his sleep, his breathing finally evening out, and we both watched him for a moment. In the quiet beeping of hospital monitors, I heard echoes of other vigils. Nights spent watching Amanda sleep after nightmares about her mother. Mornings counting breaths when fevers ran too high. "I miss your chili," Amanda whispered, and somehow those 4 words carried the weight of every apology she couldn't voice. "The kids, they miss everything about you. I miss everything about you. But I understand if you can't." "Can't what?" "Come back. Fix this. Fix us. I know I don't deserve." "Amanda Catherine Peterson," I interrupted, using her full name like I had when she was young. "Family isn't about deserving. It's about belonging, even when it's messy, even when it hurts, even when we get it wrong." As if on cue, Tyler's monitors chirped and we both startled. But it was just a routine check, and in the momentary panic and relief, I saw something shift in Amanda's eyes. The wall she'd built, the one made of pride and fear and desperate need for control, began to crack. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window, catching the steam rising from 3 mugs of hot chocolate, mine black coffee just as always. Madison sat at her usual spot at the counter, but this time her mother sat beside her. 2 weeks had passed since that night in the hospital, and we were slowly finding our way back to each other, one careful step at a time. "So," I said, sliding the morning's math homework between them, "want to tell your mom how we tackle these word problems?" Madison's face lit up as she explained our system of drawing pictures for each equation, while Amanda listened with an attention I hadn't seen from her in years. She'd taken a step back from her biggest cases, arranged to work from home 2 days a week. Small changes, but I could see their impact in the softening of her shoulders, the return of her smile. Tyler burst in from the backyard, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Grandpa, the birdhouse has birds!" He grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the door. The birdhouse, the one I'd been working on when everything fell apart, now hung proudly from the old maple tree. Sure enough, a pair of cardinals had made it their home. "Life finds a way back," I said, more to Amanda than to Tyler. She stood in the doorway, watching us, and I saw tears in her eyes. But these weren't the desperate tears from the hospital. These were the kind that come when something broken begins to heal. We'd set ground rules, of course. I wasn't just stepping back into the same routine that had led to our breakdown. 3 days a week, not 4. No more waiting dinner past 7. I'd kept my woodworking classes, my garden, my poker nights with Mike. Amanda had found a family therapist we all saw together every other Thursday. Even David had started joining us for Sunday dinners, his startup finally finding its footing as he learned to balance ambition with family. "Dad," Amanda said that evening, after the kids were occupied with homework and David had taken a business call on the porch, "I found something yesterday when I was cleaning out my home office." She pulled out a worn leather journal I hadn't seen in decades. Mom's diary, the one from her last year. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it to a marked page. "Jack spends so much time taking care of everyone else," she read aloud, "that he forgets to let anyone take care of him. But that's what makes him who he is. The man I fell in love with. The father who will move mountains for our daughter. I just hope Amanda learns that strength isn't about carrying every burden alone. It's about knowing when to share the load." The words hung in the air between us, Sarah's voice reaching across 23 years to tell us exactly what we'd needed to hear. Amanda closed the journal gently. "I get it now, Dad. Why you kept showing up, even when I took you for granted. Why you stepped back when I hurt you. You were teaching me the same lesson Mom tried to teach you." Tyler's laugh rang out from the living room, followed by Madison's voice showing him how to solve a math problem, just like I'd taught her. The garden visible through my kitchen window had sprouted its first tomatoes, planted by small hands under my guidance. David's latest prototype sat half-assembled on my workbench, father and daughter-in-law bonding over power tools and possibility. "You know what I've learned?" I said, pulling Amanda close like I used to when thunderstorms frightened her. "A burden shared becomes a bridge. All those years I spent trying to be everything for you after we lost your mom. I thought I had to be perfect. But what you needed, what the kids need, what we all need, isn't perfection. It's presence. It's permission to be beautifully, imperfectly human together." The timer dinged, and the smell of my signature chili filled the kitchen. But now Amanda moved to stir it, adding her own touch to the recipe she'd finally asked me to teach her. Madison set the table without being asked, placing the blue plate at Tyler's spot because she'd learned, as I had, that small gestures of love matter. David wandered in from his call, rolled up his sleeves and started chopping vegetables for a salad. And me? I sat at my kitchen counter watching my family move around each other in this dance we were all learning together. The weight I'd carried for so long felt different now, not lighter exactly, but more evenly distributed. Like the joists and beams of a well-built house, each of us supporting the other, creating something stronger than any of us could be alone. "Dinner's ready," Amanda called, and as everyone gathered around the table, this table that had held so many memories, tears, and reconciliations, I caught a glimpse of Sarah's picture on the wall. She was smiling, as if she'd known all along that we'd find our way here, not to perfection, but to understanding, not to an ending, but to a new beginning. After all, that's what family is. Not a burden to bear, but a story we write together, one day, one meal, one moment of grace at a time.